everybody, for joining us again. This month we are in March. We're getting really close to wrapping up our Egg and Hort afternoon adventures, and we're glad that you've stuck with us throughout this year. And we're kind of getting ready to put all the pieces that we've learned about together. We're now into planting seasons. So if we think back to some of the things that we learned about, that's going to be important as we get ready to plant our gardens or our fields, depending if you're a farmer or a gardener. We're going to connect all the dots now. So we've learned about how to prepare our gardens, how to prepare the ground. Maybe last fall you did some tilling of your garden or your fields. We learned about soil temperature with Nick in January. And this month we're going to talk about planting seasons. So first of all, it's the time of the year that farmers and gardeners plant their crops. So March, the weather's starting to warm up. While we got some snow around the Benson area the last couple days, the weather's warming up. It's starting to feel kind of like spring. And so farmers and gardeners are itching to get ready to go. And this month, we're going to learn about planting, how to prepare or how to make your garden plans, where you're going to put things, and the time when the time is right to plant your garden. We're going to learn about that. So the first thing that's important to know is that there's two different types of planting seasons. Does anybody have any idea what those planting seasons are or what they're called? You can unmute or use the chat box to throw out your guess.
I think that depending on what zone you're in, there is fall and then there's spring planting season.
Yes, that is true. We're going to learn a little about that in a little bit. McLeod, do you have another guess? So Giselle, you were talking about fall planting seasons and spring planting seasons, and you are right. There are planting seasons in the fall and the spring. One that we're going to talk about is a cool season planting season and a warm season planting season. And this is kind of based on the temperature, more so the season. So it's important to plant vegetables in the right season if you're expecting an abundant harvest. Most vegetables and fruits belong in one of the two seasonal groups, the cool seasonal crops and the warm seasonal crops. And it's dependent on which vegetable goes in which category, depends on how well they tolerate those weather conditions. So does anybody have any ideas of what a cool season vegetable might be? Ben?
I guess when it comes to me thinking of cool season crops versus warm season crops, when I think of cool season, I think like wheat and sugar beets and sunflowers. And then when it comes to warm, it's more the soybean and corn department.
Yes, very good answers. And then when we think of our garden vegetables too, asparagus, broccoli, onions, rhubarb, garlic, those are some of the ones that I think of. Of course, there's a big long list too, but this cool season vegetables are planted when the ground temperature is cooler and the air temperature is cooler, so that they mature either in the spring, like we're going to talk about winter wheat in a little bit, which is actually planted in the fall. And these vegetables or crops, they mature early in the summer before the heat of the summer, because these crops can tolerate the frost and short freezes, and their seeds will germinate in the cold soil. So you can plant or transplant these crops outside as early as April. So keep that in mind as we keep going. And germinate, we're going to talk about that in a little bit too, if you're not sure what that word means. What about warm season crops? Any ideas?
So I'm thinking like root vegetables that need the warmth to germinate the seeds when they're planted deeper. So like carrots and potatoes.
Okay, good guesses. Any others? Ben?
How about like sweet corn and tomatoes and such?
Yes, you've got those on my list. And Giselle, actually, those root vegetables are actually they're actually cool season crops. They can be sheltered under the ground, and they actually germinate in the cooler temperatures. So very good. Another one on the cool season that I think about is asparagus. I don't know about you guys, but around where I live in the early spring, I see lots of people walking through the road ditches looking for asparagus. Ben's shaking his head. He sees, baby, you're out doing that. But the warm season crops, they require a minimum soil temperature of 50 degrees. The warm season crops can be planted mid to late summer for a fall harvest. Now, we're kind of talking about the garden vegetables. Obviously, if you're planting corn and soybeans, they need a lot longer growing season. So we're not going to be planting our corn or soybeans in the middle of the summer because they're not going to be ready when we want to harvest them in October and November. So the warm season crops are planted mid to late summer for a fall harvest. These crops do best with the air and soil temperature between 65 and 85 degrees. 75 degrees is about perfect. And the warm season crops need to be planted when there is no longer a risk for frost, because these crops do not tolerate the frost or the cold. They'll just die, and you'll need to replant them. Okay.
Say, Becca?
Yep.
Britta has her hand up there.
All right, Britta, do you have a question?
I was saying, you know how you plant warm season crops in the middle of summer, like you were talking about? We kind of cheat and we start our warm season crops indoors and then we plant them outside all at the same time. Well, not usually at the same time. Sometimes we'll start the cold season crops a little bit earlier, but only like by a few days or a week.
That's a great idea. You will learn more about those and why you do that in some of our challenges later this month too. Thanks for sharing that, Britta. All right. We talked about this a little bit already with some of the examples you guys had, but did you know that you can plant crops and vegetables in the fall? I see some head shakes no and some head shakes yes. Yep, you can. And Giselle and Aria, do you have a question?
Yes, planting crops in the fall are really good because then they're cover crops like winter rye. Or if you're in like southern Minnesota, there's actually, you can plant some cool weather crops completely year round then too.
Yes.
We actually planted some garlic in the fall.
Yes, that's a perfect time to do that. And it's never too late to plant seeds in a garden, actually, except when it's covered by snow. Then it's not really, it's kind of too late then. So fall is a good time to plant bulbs. So these plants on the screen that I'm going to show you, onions, these are kind of those root vegetables we were talking about, garlic, some green leafy greens. That was kind of a surprise to me that those would their seed would go dormant over winter and then they would come up in the spring. Broccoli, and asparagus, which we talked about. Radish is a common cover crop. And carrots. So these plants will germinate in mild soil temperatures in the fall and grow over winter regardless of how cold it is. Okay, so I mentioned we were going to talk about germination. So germination is the process in which an organism grows from a seed or a similar structure. So that's basically when a plant begins to grow or sprout. So you can see on the picture here, I've got a corn seed. So let's look at arrow 1. Has this corn seed germinated yet?
No.
No, it hasn't. Now has it?
Yes.
Yes, you can see the little sprout on there. And we know that corn needs a warmer soil temperature to be able to germinate. So when you're thinking of planting your gardens in your seeds that you've been collecting from participating in our afternoon adventures here, we need to think about if they're going to be, if they're good, if they're going to work for us. And you'll notice on your seed packets that they have an expiration date on it too, but we'll get to that in a second. But first, a seed needs 4 things to germinate. Anyone know what those might be?
Light, water, soil, and oxygen or space.
Nice job, Evan.
They probably need nutrients too from the soil.
Yes.
Heat.
Yep. First thing they need is water.
No big chickens to tramp on them.
No chickens to tramp on them. That would be helpful, Britta. They need soil. And you see the soil thermometer there, that we need a good soil temperature for them to be able to germinate. They need sunlight. And they need oxygen. So not only do plants get oxygen from the air, but they also get air from the soil and the mitochondria of their cells that they grow in. So gets pretty sciencey the more we learn about it. All right, so that's what our seeds need to germinate and to continue growing. So now we're going to do a do-it-yourself seed germination test. And if you've got some seeds close to you and have access to a paper towel and some water, you can do this test along with me. Otherwise, you can watch as I do it and you can try it out later. Britta's pretty much got this going, I think, in her room there. She's got some, was it beans sprouting in a paper towel, Britta?
Yeah,
Okay.
and peas in a little paper cup thing that I made.
Awesome. So we're going to do a germination test, and this is to see if our seed is viable. So viable means, is the seed going to work or not? Is it going to live or is it going to die? So as I said, your seed packet probably has a use by date on it. So if your seed packet is past its use by date, instead of planting them and not getting anything, and instead of throwing them away, try out this test to see if they're going to work or not. If your seed packet is within its use by date, there's not really any reason to try out the germination test unless they haven't been stored properly. And if you remember back to October when Nick showed us how to collect and clean seeds from a squash or a pumpkin, he told us that we should place the seeds in a tightly sealed container and keep them in a cool, dry place. Between 32 degrees and 41 degrees would be ideal. And that's because, like we learned on the last slide, if the temperature is warm, it might trick that seed into thinking it's time to germinate. So then if it tries to germinate because it's warm and then the other conditions aren't right, it doesn't have soil and water, then your seed's going to kind of turn out to be a dud. So try out this test. And it would be disappointing to spend a lot of time and effort planting a seed or garden and not to have any plants grow. So we're going to try out this quick and easy test. And to try out this test, you're going to need a paper towel sheet. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can show you guys what I'm going to do. So if you have a paper towel, the brown paper towels work the best because they're not bleached. Sometimes bleach can kind of kill your seed. I learned that the hard way. So this is actually a napkin from a restaurant. It's brown. You probably can't tell that on your screen, but I'm going to use this napkin. And then you're going to want some seeds. So if you have your seeds that you saved from your pumpkin or your squash or any other seeds, you can grab those. I'm going to tilt my camera down so you can see what I'm doing. So I used my expired packet of 4-H agronomy seeds. It's sweet corn. And I am going to pick out 10 seeds. I kind of picked out the bad ones, like this one's not a very good looking one. And I'm going to pick 10. And I'm picking 10 because that's an easy number to do a little math and just determine my germination rate. So after I got my 10 seeds, You're going to take your paper towel, and if you got a spray bottle, you can spray it down, or you can run it under the sink and get it wet. But then you want to wring it out so it's not soaking wet. So I'm just going to spray it. Or I'm going to pour water on it because I appear to have a faulty spray bottle. Just going to kind of crinkle it up in a ball. So it's all good and wet, moist. Then I'm going to wring out the extra water. Unfold it carefully. Okay, so I got it. And then real simple, you're just going to line up all your seeds in a row. You can use any kind of seeds. If you're using a really small seed, you don't have to try to count all those out. Like carrot seeds are really, really little. You can just put a little pinch on there, and you can count the seeds after they've sprouted. It'll be a little easier. So I got them laid out. Then I'm just going to fold it in half and kind of press down so that the seeds get some of that moisture on it. And then I've got a plastic bag that I labeled with the variety on it. See, that's upside down for you. And then put the date on it. And then I'm just going to roll up, kind of like a tube, roll up my paper towel with seeds, stick it in the bag. And I'm not going to seal the bag. Why not?
You need airflow.
It needs air. That's right, Ben. So I'm just going to leave it open and kind of roll it up, and I'm just going to stick it in a cup. And then I'll put it in the window. Okay, that easy. And then I'm going to check on my seeds every day. So you can unroll the paper towel, check on them, see if they've sprouted. Make sure the paper towel is still damp because we still need water, right, for it to germinate. And depending on what kind of seed you use, you're going to want to check the germination rate. So for beans and peas, the germination window is 7 to 10 days it'll take before you see it sprout. Depending on what you're using, again, it's going to be a little different. So you can check that out and see. You want to check every day. If after a couple weeks you're not seeing anything at all, your seeds are a dud. Okay, so you can throw those away and start with fresh ones. So I'll let you guys know in April if our sweet corn seeds are a dud that are a year old or not. On our agronomy project website, on the extension website. And if there are no more questions, we will look forward to you guys participating in our challenges coming out the rest of the month.